Hello everyone. In this video, we will review for test 3, starting with number 1, letter A, where we have 5 minus y divided by y minus 5. First, we're going to reverse this order and put our variable in front of the constant. And when we move the variable y to the left side, we get negative y, and the positive 5 goes behind y. So it would be negative y plus 5. So that's our first step. We want both of our expressions to be in the same order. And we notice the negative is at the top expression, but that y in the denominator is a positive y. So we have a negative y in the numerator, positive y in the denominator. We're going to factor out negative 1 from both the terms in the numerator. And when we factor negative 1 from negative y, we get y in parentheses. When we factor negative 1 from positive 5, we get negative 5 in parentheses. And then we just copy the denominator, leave it the same, y minus 5. We see y minus 5 in the numerator and the denominator, so we can cancel those out, and our answer is negative 1. Now for letter B, we have 5 minus x in the numerator, and in the denominator 4x minus 20. So again, we're going to reverse the order of these terms. In the numerator, we're going to put the variable in front. So we're going to put the minus x in front of the positive 5. Afterward, we're going to factor 4 from the terms in the denominator. So when we factor 4 from 4x, we get x minus, when we factor 4 from this minus 20, we get minus 5 in parentheses. So that's what this denominator becomes. In the numerator, we factor negative 1 from both those terms. When we factor negative 1 from the minus x, we get x in parentheses. And when we factor negative 1 from positive 5, we get negative 5. Notice we have x minus 5 in the numerator and the denominator, so we can cancel those terms. And what are we left with? It's negative 1/4. That's our answer. Now in the next example, you see the trinomial x squared minus 5x plus 6 in the numerator, and in the denominator x squared plus x minus 6. We'll factor both of those trinomials. So our x squared, we factor using x, and we factor 6 using minus 2 and minus 3. With our trinomial in the denominator, we factored x squared using x, and we factored the minus 6 using a positive 3 and a minus 2. The minus 2's cancel in the numerator and the denominator. And what's left is our solution. We're left with x minus 3 in the numerator and x plus 3 in the denominator. This is our answer. Letter D, we have 1 times c minus 7 divided by c plus 7 times c minus 7. We factored here, and we see the c minus 7's cancel, leaving 1 divided by c plus 7. You factored your trinomial, you have your common factor in the numerator, we cancel those two common factors. This is our answer, 1 divided by c plus 7. Now for number 2, if f of x is equal to 7 minus x divided by x plus 6, you can't use negative 6 as an x value. Now the reason you can't use negative 6 is because if x equals negative 6, then this denominator would be negative 6 plus 6, and that would be 0. We can't have 0 in our denominator. So in order for us to find the domain, remember, you take this denominator, whatever the denominator is, in this case it's x plus 6, and you set it equal to 0. You want to know what value of x would make this denominator 0. And that allows you to come up with your limitations. And we solve this equation by subtracting 6 from both sides. We see x would equal negative 6. Anytime x is negative 6, the denominator becomes 0, which can't be. Therefore, our domain could be any other number that's not -6. So in interval notation, we would write negative infinity, comma, -6. Okay, so think about our number line here. We can have any number on this number line except for -6. So we'll put an open circle at -6. X could be any number that's smaller or less than -6, or it could be any number that's greater than -6. So this is our interval that shows this section to the left of -6. This is negative infinity, comma, -6. And then the union, open a second set of parentheses, will start at -6, and then we go to positive infinity, close the parentheses. But this is the domain, possible values of x that could be substituted in the domain. Number 3, if g of x equals x plus 2 divided by 10 minus 2x. Again, you want to know what would make this denominator 0. So this 10 minus 2x, what would the values of x be that will make that 10 minus 2x equals 0? To get that value, you're going to solve that equation. So you're going to subtract 10 from both sides of the equation. The 10s will cancel on the left side, leaving negative 2x equals, on the right side, 0 minus 10 gives us -10, and then we're going to divide by -2. And when we do that, the 2's will cancel. We'll get x equals -10 divided by -2. That gives us +5. So when x is 5, our denominator is 0. Therefore, the domain could be any number except 5. And in set builder notation, remember you use your squiggly lines, and we're saying x could be any number such that this vertical line is such that x cannot, so we put a not equal to symbol, equal 5. This is our answer. Now, number 4, we have x cubed equals 25x. Now, we're solving this equation. We're going to get all of our terms to one side of the equation so we can set it equal to 0, factor, and then solve. So we move this 25x to the left side. We're going to subtract 25x from both sides of this equation. Now, when we do that, the 25x will cancel on the right, leaving 0. Carry down your equal sign. And on the left side, we have x cubed minus 25x. We can factor x from both these terms. So we factor x from x cubed. We get x squared in parentheses. And then we factor x from 25x. We get minus 25 in parentheses. Close your parentheses, equals 0. Now, this x squared minus 25, that's a difference of perfect square terms, where we can identify our a and b terms. A, what term are we squaring to get x squared? That's x and x. So we have x plus and x minus in our parentheses below. And then our b term, what are we squaring to get 25? That's 5. So we put 5 and 5. And don't forget to carry down your x in front that you factored out. Now that we have all three of these terms, the x outside parentheses, x plus 5, and x minus 5, we're going to set each of these terms equal to 0. Remember, any of those terms could be equal to 0. So x equals 0, or x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0. Now the first one is already solved for us. One of our solutions is 0. The second equation, x plus 5 equals 0, we're going to solve by subtracting 5 from both sides of the equation. 5's will cancel, we'll get x is -5. And now the third equation, we're going to add 5 to both sides of the equation. And we'll get x equals 5. So these are our three solutions: 0, -5, and +5, or +5. Now letter B, we have x cubed minus 2x squared equals 9x minus 18. So we move all our terms to the left side. We're going to subtract 9x and add 18 to both sides of this equation. Now when we do that, The 9x and 18 are going to cancel on the right. We just have 0 left. So we carry down that 0, carry down our equal sign. And on the left side, we have x cubed minus 2x squared minus 9x plus 18. We're going to solve by grouping. Remember, you only use this grouping method when you have 4 terms. So we group together the first 2 terms, we group together the second 2 terms. And from these first 2 terms, we can factor x squared. When we factor x squared from x cubed, we get x in parentheses. And when we factor x squared from minus 2x squared, we get minus 2 in parentheses. Now the second set, we factored 9 from 9x, and we got, well, it's a negative 9. We factored negative 9 from 9x, and we got x in parentheses. And negative 9 from 18, we got minus 2 in parentheses. Now remember, you know if you factored correctly, if you see the same term in parentheses. Now that's going to be a part of our solution. So x minus 2 is one of the factors of our solution. The other factor comes from the terms that are outside the parentheses. So x squared and minus 9. Now x minus 2 will remain the same, but this x squared minus 9, that's a difference of perfect square terms where you can identify your a and b terms and then factor. Our a term, we're squaring x to get x squared. So we'll factor using x plus and x minus. And then our b term, what are we squaring to get 9? That's 3. So we put 3 and 3. Each of these factors we're going to set equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. And now we're going to solve all of these equations. So the equation on the left, we're going to add 2 to both sides of the equation. We'll get x equals 2. Or our second equation, we're going to subtract 3 from both sides, and we'll get x equals negative 3. Or our last equation, we're going to add 3 to both sides of the equation. We'll get x equals 3. So here are 3 possible solutions: 2, negative 3, and positive 3. All right, let's look at example 4. Letter C, we have y cubed minus 10y squared plus 9y equals 0. Notice all of these terms on the left have a y. We can factor y. From y cubed, we'll get y squared in parentheses. And when we factor y from minus 10y squared, we get minus 10y in parentheses. And when we factor y from 9y, we get 9 in parentheses. So we carry down the y. And this y squared minus 10x plus 9, this trinomial can be factored. We factor y squared using y, and then we factored the 9 using negative 9 and negative 1. Now we'll set each of these terms equal to 0 and solve. So y equals 0, one of our solutions. That's the factor outside parentheses. Or y minus 9 equals 0, or y minus 1 equals 0. So we already have our first solution, it's 0. Or when we solve the second equation, we're going to add 9 to both sides, and we'll get y equals 9. Or that last equation, we're going to add 1, and we'll get y equals 1. So these are our 3 solutions: 0, or 9, or 1. Now letter D, we have 5b squared equals 31b plus 28. And once again, we're going to collect all the terms to the left side of that equation. We're going to subtract 31b and subtract 28. And when we do that, the terms will cancel. On the right side of the equation, we'll have 0. And on the left side, we now have 5b squared minus 31b minus 28. We're factoring this 5b squared using 5b and 1b, 5b and b. And then we're factoring negative 28 using 4 and minus 7. Now we'll set each of these factors equal to 0 and solve. So 5b plus 4 equals 0, or b minus 7 equals 0. Now for this equation, on the left side, we're going to subtract 4 from both sides of the equation. We'll get 5b equals negative 4. And then we're going to divide both sides by 5. The 5's will cancel. We'll get b equals negative 4/5, or When we solve this equation on the right, we're going to add 7 to both sides, and we'll get b equals 7. So b equals negative 4/5 or 7. Letter E, we have 5x squared minus 15x equals 0. We can factor 5x from both of these terms. So 5x, when we factor 5x from 5x squared, we get x in parentheses. And when we factor 5x from minus 15x, we get minus 3 in parentheses. Now we'll set each of these terms equal to 0 and solve. So 5x equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. Now with the equation on the left side, we're going to divide both sides by 5, and 0 divided by 5 is just 0. So x equals 0, or with the equation on the right, we're adding 3 to both sides of that equation. So x equals 3. So x equals 0 or x equals 3. All right, for letter F, we have these rational equations. Remember, these equations can only be true if the denominator is not equal to 0. You can't have 0 in your denominator. So you want to figure out what your possible domain values could be. What could the x values be? We know that in the denominator of this first fraction, we have x plus 4. So what would make this denominator equal to 0? It would be negative 4. If x were negative 4, negative 4 plus 4 would make this denominator 0. And we know that can't happen. Therefore, when we solve this equation, we can't get negative 4 as one of our solutions. Also, the fraction on the right side, we have 5 divided by x minus 8. Again, this denominator can't be equal to 0. So x cannot be 8. If it were 8 minus 8 would make this denominator 0. Therefore, when we solve the problem, we just want to make sure that we don't have solutions that are negative 4 or 8. Now, to solve, what we're going to do is cross multiply. We're multiplying the terms that are diagonal to each other. So we multiply 6 times x minus 8 and 5 times x plus 4. Then we distribute on both sides. So 6 times x gives us 6x. 6 times minus 8 gives us negative 48. We carry down the equal sign. 5 times x gives us 5x. 5 times 4 gives us 20. Now we're going to combine like terms. We see the 5x is positive, so we're going to subtract 5x from both sides. Also, we're going to add 48 to both sides of the equation. So we're adding 48. And when we do that, the 5x will cancel on the right side. The 48 will cancel on the left side. And 6x minus 5x gives us x on the left. On the right side, 20 plus 48 gives us 68. So here's our solution, x equals 68. For letter G, we see x divided by 3 minus x. Again, this denominator cannot be 3. So we can't have 3 in the denominator, because if we did, that denominator would be 0. So we can get any other solution other than 3. But when we go to solve this equation, we want to collect the terms on either side of the equation so that we could cross multiply, just like we did with the previous problem. So we're going to add this 4 to both sides of the equation. And when we do that, the 4's will cancel on the left. On the right side, we have 1 plus 4, that'll give us 5. We'll write 5 as a fraction by putting it over 1 and then cross multiply. So we have x times 1 gives us x. Put the equal sign and the opposite product, 5 times 3 minus x. On that right side, we got to distribute. 5 times 3 gives us 15, and 5 times minus x gives us negative 5x. Carry down your x on the left side in your equal sign. We're going to add 5x to both sides of this equation. 5x will cancel on the right. We'll carry down the 15. On the left side, x plus 5x gives us 6x. And then we'll divide both sides of the equation by 6 to get our solution. X equals 15 over 6. But this can be reduced because both of these terms can be divided by 3. And when we divide by 3, 15 divided by 3 gives us 5. 6 divided by 3 gives us 2. So 5/2 will be our solution. All right, in the next problem, number 5, letter A, we have J equals Mn divided by U, and we're solving for M. We want to get M by itself. So what you notice here is that you can actually make this J a fraction by putting it over 1 as well. And then let's just cross multiply, just like we did with the previous problem. We have J times U, that gives us JU, and 1 times Mn, that gives us Mn. Now to solve for M, we just divide both sides of this equation by M, or by N, excuse me. Divide by N, and the N's will cancel, leaving M on the right side of this equal sign, and on the left side we have JU divided by N. This is our answer. Letter B, we have AX equals L minus 2X. And here we're going to solve for X. Now what we notice is we have X on both sides of this equation. We need to collect these terms that both have an X term. So we're going to add 2X to both sides first so we can put the X terms together. When we do that, the 2X is going to cancel on the right side, leaving L. We'll carry down the equal sign. And on the left side, we now have AX plus 2X. Factor the X from both of the terms. When we factor X from AX, we get A in parentheses. When we factor X from 2X, we get 2 in parentheses. Now we'll divide both sides of this equation by that A plus 2 factor. Now, when we do that, we'll get our answer. We'll get X by itself on the left side. The A plus 2's cancel. We have X equals L divided by A plus 2. Now, letter C, we have negative BY equals AY minus D. And we're solving for Y, but again, we have these Y terms that are on either side. Now, this is a minus B on the left side. We have a positive A on the right side. So we're going to carry this B to the right side this time. Let's add BY. And then that means we're going to subtract or add this D. It's negative already, so we're going to add the D to both sides of the equation. Now, the D's will cancel on the right side. The BY is going to cancel on the left side. So on the right side, we're now left with that AY plus BY. And on the right side, we have D. Carry down your D and your equal sign, and we're going to factor Y from both of these terms on the left. When we factor Y from AY, we get A in parentheses, and when we factor Y from BY, we get B in parentheses. Now to solve for Y, we just divide both sides of the equation by that factor. I'm going to divide by A plus B. And that's our answer. Y equals D divided by A plus B. Letter D, we see 2C minus D equals AXY. Now we're solving for C this time. So we're going to start by adding D to both sides of this equation. And when we do that, the D's are going to cancel, leaving 2C on the left equals AXY plus B on the right side. And then lastly, we're going to divide everything on the left and everything on the right side by 2. And so we'll get our answer. C equals AXY plus D divided by 2. Number 6, letter A. We have S cubed minus 4S squared plus 7S minus 28. Notice these 4 terms. So we're going to factor by grouping. We'll group together the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Our GCF that we're factoring from the first 2 terms is S squared. When we factor S squared from S cubed, we get S in parentheses. And when we factor S from minus 4S squared, we get minus 4 in parentheses. From the second two terms, we're factoring 7. When we factor 7 from 7s, we get s in parentheses. And when we factor 7 from minus 28, we get minus 4 in parentheses. Now notice we have the same factor, s minus 4, so we know we factored it correctly, and that's a part of our solution, that s minus 4 factor. The other factor comes from the terms that are outside parentheses. So s squared plus 7. This is our answer. Letter B, we have 5w squared minus 26w plus 5. We factored 5w squared using 5w and w. And we factored the 5 using minus 1 and minus 5. This is our answer. Letter C, we have 25c squared minus 40c plus 16. So we factored 25c squared using 5c and 5c, and we factored 16 using minus 4 and minus 4. We have the same factor twice, so we can rewrite that as 5c minus 4 to the second power. Letter D, we have 64a cubed minus 81a, so we have only two terms. We also have a common factor of a, so we factor a from 64a cubed, we'll get 64a squared in parentheses. And when we factor a from minus 81a, we get minus 81 in parentheses. So keep that a outside the parentheses. And 64a squared minus 81, this is a difference of perfect square terms where you can identify your a and b. A term, our 8a, we're squaring 8 to get 64, and we're squaring a to get a squared. So 8a and 8a. And our 81, we square 9, so our b term is going to be 9. Our factors are 8a plus 9 and 8a minus 9. This is our answer. Letter E, we have a difference of perfect squares again. We have x to the fourth power minus 16. Our a and b terms can be identified. What are we squaring to get x to the fourth? It's x squared and x squared. And 16, we're squaring 4. So we got x squared plus 4 and x squared minus 4. Now this x squared minus 4 is actually a difference of perfect square terms again. We can identify our a and b terms. Our a term, we're squaring x to get x squared. Our b term, we're squaring 2 to get 4. So we would factor as x plus 2 and x minus 2. And then just carry down that x squared plus 4 term. This is our answer. Letter F, we have negative 5r to the fourth power plus 15r minus 30. We can factor 5 from all three of these terms. And we're factoring negative 5. When we factor negative 5 from negative 5r to the fourth, we'll get r to the fourth. Now, the reason we're factoring negative out is because we want this leading coefficient to be positive and not negative. When we factor negative 5 from positive 15r, we get negative 3r. And when we factor negative 5 from negative 30, we get positive 6. This is our answer. Letter G, we have 3x squared plus 13x minus 10. So our 3x squared can be factored using 3x and x. And the minus 10 we factor using minus 2 and positive 5. Now remember how you check these answers to make sure that you place the order correctly and that your signs are correctly. Just FOIL. You multiply the first term, the outer terms, the inner terms, and the last terms together. And when you simplify this, you should get the term that you started with. And that's how you know if you factored it correctly. All right, let's move on to number 7. And number 7, you're asked to find that height. And you're given this function. Everywhere you see your variable x, you're going to substitute the number 1. We want to know the height when we have that value of 1. Now remember, we were given this function in our question. So the object is propelled straight upward from the ground at an initial velocity of 112 feet per second, and the height h in feet t per seconds is given by this equation. Now we want to know how high. Letter A is the object after 1 second. Letter B, how high is the object after 2.5 seconds. And C, how many seconds does it take for the object to hit the ground? So this is when the height is at 0. So we're using this function, h equals negative 16t squared plus 112t, and we're substituting 1 for part A, we're substituting 1 for t, and then for part B, we're substituting 2.5 for t. For part C, we're substituting 0 for the height. All right, so looking at letter A, we substitute 1. We get negative 16 times 1 squared. That's just negative 16 times 1. That gives us negative 16. Plus 112 times 1, again, times 1, so just 112. When we add this together, we get 96 feet is the height after 1 second. Now after 2.5 seconds, part B, we're substituting 2.5 for t. We'll get negative 16 times 2.5 squared plus 112 times 2.5. And when we add those together, we'll get the height as 180 feet. Now letter C, we want to know how long it takes for the object to hit the ground. So this time you're given the height of 0. When will that height be 0? So we substitute 0 for h, and it's equal to negative 16t squared plus 112t. On this right side, we can factor 16t from both terms. When we factor 16t from 16t squared, we get t in parentheses. And when we factor, well, actually, I skipped through this step. So we had a negative at the beginning. What we did initially is we want to factor out that negative 1. So if we take away that negative 1, change these signs, right, from both these terms, that would leave us with a positive 16t squared and a minus 112t in parentheses. So from that, then we factored out our 16t from both of these terms. We had our negative 16 in front, so we should have kept that negative there. Negative 16t from t squared leaves us with t in parentheses, and the 16t from the 112 leaves us with the minus 7 in parentheses. Now we set both of these terms equal to 0. Okay, it doesn't matter whether that's negative or positive. We know that when we divide any number, whether it's negative or positive, when we divide it into 0, we're going to get 0. Here, when we set that factor t, we set in this factor t minus 7 equal to 0. To solve, we're going to add 7 to both sides of the equation. The 7's going to cancel, and we'll get t equals 7 seconds. T cannot be 0, right? There's no such thing as 0 seconds. I mean, that's no time at all. And we know already that the object started on the ground. So that's what this represents, starting at the ground. But the object is going to hit the ground again at 7 seconds. So it'll go up in the air, then come back down around 7 seconds after being thrown up. Let's look at part or number 8, letter A. Now, number 8, letter A, you're asked to find f of 0, letter B, f of 4, letter C, f of negative 4. And you're using this function, 5x divided by x squared minus 16. So to find f of 0, we're substituting 0 for x. So in our numerator, we have 5 times 0, that's just 0. In the denominator, we have 0 squared minus 16. That's just minus 16. And 0 divided by minus 16 gives us 0. Letter A, f of 4. So we're substituting 4 now. 5 times 4 in the numerator gives us 20. And 4 squared minus 16, that's 16 minus 16 gives us 0 in the denominator. And remember, you can't have 0 in the denominator. Therefore, this function is undefined when f is 4, at f of 4. So when x is 4, the function is undefined. The function is also undefined when x is -4. We have 5 times -4 or -20 in the numerator. And -4 squared, that's 16 minus 16 equals 0 in the denominator. And again, we can't have 0 in the denominator. Now, number 9, we're asked to find f of -1. So we're substituting -1 here. We have -5 times -1 cubed. That's a negative times negative. -1 cubed becomes -1 times -5 gives us +5. 9 times -1 squared, that's 1 times 9 gives us 9. And then -9 times -1, another negative, and negative becomes +9, -1 at the end. Now we're going to add left to right. 5 plus 9 plus 9 minus the 1 gives us 22 as our answer. The value of this function at -1 is 22. Now letter A for number 10, you're just subtracting A, B, and C, each of those terms. Now, in our first term, letter A, we have 6b minus 15 minus 5b plus 7 in the numerator, and it's divided by b squared minus 64. This two terms in the numerator, the b terms, 6b minus 5b, we can combine those to get 1b. And then -15 plus 7 gives us -8. The b squared minus 64, that's a difference of perfect square terms where you can identify your a and b terms. We factor using b minus 8 and b plus 8. We square 8 in order to get 64, and we square b in order to get b squared. We carry over our b minus 8, and we see b minus 8 will cancel, leaving 1 divided by b plus 8 as our answer. Now letter B, we have -7y divided by y minus g. Now we notice we're subtracting 4y minus g divided by 4 times y minus g. Now both of these terms have y minus g, but what's missing? The 4 is not included in the denominator of the first fraction. Before we can add these two fractions together, we got to have common denominators. So we have to multiply everything in this first fraction by 4. So we have in our numerator -7y times 4, and in the denominator y minus 8 times 4. Minus, we carry down our second term to remain the same. Now, at this point, we see our denominators are the same, so we would keep the denominator the same and combine the terms in the numerator. So 7y times 4, that gives us -28y, minus 4y, and then minus, remember that's two negatives, that becomes plus g. This 28y minus 4y, we combine those two terms together, that gives us -32y plus the g, and in the denominator, we keep 4 times y minus g, but this is our answer. Letter C, we have 7x minus 2 in the numerator. In the denominator, x plus 2x minus 2, and we're subtracting 3 times x plus 2 in the numerator, divided by x minus 2 times x plus 2. Now we have x minus 2 and x plus 2 in the denominators, so we can keep that denominator the same. Combine the terms in the numerators. So we have 7x minus 2, we just copy that down, minus 3 times x. So minus 3 times x gives us -3x, and minus 3 times 2 gives us -6. Combine your like terms. 7x minus 3x, that gives us 4x. Minus 2 minus 6 gives us -8. Carry over our denominator, and in the numerator we can factor 4 from both of these terms. So when we factor 4 from 4x, we get x in parentheses. And when we factor 4 from the -8, we get -2 in parentheses. Carry over the denominator, and we see the x minus 2's can cancel. So what's left is our answer. 4 in the numerator, so 4 divided by x plus 2 in the denominator. In the next example, number 11, we have x minus 4 times x plus 2 divided by x squared times 2x minus 7. And we're multiplying this time times x times 4x squared minus 49 in the numerator divided by 4 times x minus 4. So we're going to factor and see where we can simplify. The numerator of x minus 4 and x plus 2, that remains the same. We carried it down. And the denominator remains the same as well. We'll carry it down. Times, we're still multiplying. Now over here on the right side, this 4x squared minus 49, this is a difference of perfect square terms. We can factor using our a plus b and a minus b format. Carry down your x outside, and our a term is 2x, so we have 2x plus and 2x minus. Our b term is 7, so we put our 7s there. And then in the denominator, we have 4 times x minus 4, that stays the same. The x minus 4 in the denominator of the right fraction cancels with the x minus 4 in the numerator of the left fraction. And the 2x minus 7 from the denominator of the left fraction, that cancels with the 2x minus 7 in the numerator of the second fraction. Now what's left is our answer in the x terms. Let's not forget about that. So we got 1x here in the numerator of the fraction on the right, and then we got 2 x's in the denominator. So we'll cancel out one of those x's in the denominator. That leaves 1 left over. So our final answer, in our numerator, we have x plus 2 and 2x plus 7. In the denominator, we have this x over here and the 4. So 4x. This is our answer. Number 12, we see letter A, b plus 2 divided by 8 times 8b, and that's divided by b minus 7 times b times 8b. Now, in our division problems, remember, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So we have this 8b term that's being multiplied, and the reason that's being multiplied is, let's go to the original problem. So when we look at the original problem, we have b plus 2 divided by 8 divided by, well, b plus 2 over 8 divided by b minus 7 over b. So when we look at this, let's erase this section. Remember that dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So really, you could just take the reciprocal of the denominator, whatever that bottom fraction is, and then multiply it. So we have b plus 2 over 8 in the numerator. We're going to multiply. Remember that keep, change, flip. We're keeping the first fraction the same. We're changing the operation from division to multiplication. And then we're flipping the bottom fraction. So when we flip the bottom fraction, b moves to the numerator and b minus 7 moves to the denominator. So that leaves us in the numerator with b times b plus 2 divided by, in the denominator, 8 times b minus 7. Okay, so that's where this answer comes from. All right, for letter B, you have to have common denominators, remember, in order to add or subtract fractions. So in our numerator, we notice that our denominators are not the same. We have only one a in the first term, but we have 2 a's in the second one. So our a squared is what we need both denominators to include. And then the b squared, we have 2 b terms in the first fraction, but we only have 1 in the second one. So in order for us to combine these two fractions, we need to have 2 b's and 2 a's in the denominator. Now, to make that happen, we have to multiply that common denominator that we want by both of these terms. We want that common denominator in order to subtract. And when we multiply a squared times b squared, the denominator we want, times both of these terms, that a is going to cancel with the 1a here, leaving 1a in the numerator times 5. So that's 5a. That's how we get this 5a here. The b squared is going to cancel. It's going to be gone. So we're just left with minus 9. And we're looking at the second term, I'm sorry. So the b squared is going to cancel all together. So that first term just becomes 5a. You're done with the first term. The second term, we got minus a squared. So the a squareds are going to cancel. The one of the b's is going to cancel, but we're still left with 1b. So that 1b that's left will include with the minus 9. So we got minus 9b. Our numerator, 5a minus 9b. And in the denominator, we see our two fractions are different. Our denominators are different. We have a squared here and 1a, b squared here and 1b. So we need both of these fractions to have a squared and b squared. So therefore we multiply. Remember, that's called our least common multiple. We multiply both of these terms by that LCM. When we do that, the a squared and b squared is going to cancel, leaving just 4 for the first term. The second term, a and a squared, one of those a's are going to cancel, leaving 1 left over. So that's 9a. And one of the b terms is going to cancel, leaving 1b left over. So 9ab will be our second term. But this is our answer, 5a minus 9b divided by 4 plus 9ab. This is the last example. We'll stop here.